Possum juggler is one who juggles possums. Now, we would prefer one who can juggle at least Hello? Hello?
She played a buttoned-up secretary on one of the cleanest shows in TV history. He was the dirtiest comic in America. But behind the Hollywood spotlight, Nancy Kulp and Redd Foxx shared a secret that shocked everyone who found out. It wasn't just a fling, it was something deeper, riskier, and far more dangerous in their time. They knew if anyone caught them, it could end both their careers. But they did it anyway. And decades later, the truth finally slipped out. And it changes everything you thought you knew about them. Nancy Kulp was born on August 28, 1921, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the only child in a family that didn't just value education, they lived it. Her mother was a schoolteacher who became a principal. Her grandfather was a superintendent. And by the time she was a teenager, her family had moved to Florida to chase better opportunities. That blend of Southern sunshine and strict schooling shaped Nancy into something rare. A woman who would someday master journalism, languages, the military, and Hollywood itself. Nancy wasn't just smart, she was unstoppable. In 1943, she earned a journalism degree from Florida State College for Women. Then she pushed even further, getting dual master's degrees in English and French from the University of Miami. She wasn't doing it for show. She was already writing feature stories for the Miami Beach tropics, profiling stars like Clark Gable and Myrna Loy while still in school. Her sharp mind and love for storytelling gave her a calm, polished voice that made people listen. And it wasn't just academics. She belonged to Pi Beta Phi and knew how to move in any room, from lecture halls to red carpets. Then came the war. In 1944, with a promising future ahead of her, Nancy walked away from her studies and enlisted in the Navy. She joined the Waves, the all-female reserve unit, and quickly rose to lieutenant junior grade. Not a secretary, not a nurse, a ranked officer. She earned medals like the American Campaign and Good Conduct Honors, serving until 1946. She later admitted she liked the all-female environment. But it wasn't just about comfort. It was about independence, leadership, and proving that she could hold her own in a world run by men. When the war ended, she didn't slow down. She went back to journalism, still writing celebrity profiles. But this time, something was different. In 1951, she married Charles Malcolm Dacus and moved to Hollywood. Her plan was to work in publicity at MGM, using her writing skills behind the scenes. But just 3 weeks into the job, legendary director George Cukor saw something others missed. He looked past the typewriter and saw a star. Cukor and casting director Billy Gordon convinced Nancy to audition. That same year, she made her film debut in The Model and the Marriage Broker. The woman who once wrote about stars had become one. Over the next 2 decades, she stacked up more than 30 film credits. In Sabrina, she played Audrey Hepburn's maid. In The Parent Trap, she was the quirky Miss Grunecker. And though many of her roles were small and sometimes uncredited, she had a way of sticking in your memory. She didn't need a spotlight to shine. Her specialty became oddball spinsters and stern women with unexpected warmth. You might not know her name, but you knew her face. She even voiced a horse in Disney's The Aristocats in 1970. Her personal life, however, was a mystery. She married Dacus on April Fool's Day, 1951. The timing already felt like a clue. They divorced 10 years later, in 1961, just as Nancy's TV career was taking off. She never remarried, never talked about the relationship, and avoided all questions about Dacus. Some said he was gay. Others believed the marriage was a cover. Either way, Nancy kept that chapter locked tight. After the divorce, she lived alone. never linked to any romantic partner again. For a woman who played lonely characters so well, it's hard not to wonder how much was acting. Her big break on television came in The Bob Cummings Show. She played Pamela Livingstone, an eccentric birdwatcher in a pith helmet. It was weird, it was funny, and it worked. Nancy turned this oddball into a character people remembered. She only appeared in 15 episodes between 1955 and 1959, but that was enough. The show's creator, Paul Henning, never forgot her. When he created the Beverly Hillbillies, he called Nancy for the role of Jane Hathaway, another bird-loving oddball, but this one would become iconic. Before the Beverly Hillbillies, Nancy popped up on every major TV show of the 1950s and early 60s. She played a maid on I Love Lucy, a drunk waitress on Maverick, and a curtsy coach on Perry Mason. Sometimes she was a math teacher, sometimes a nosy neighbor, always unforgettable. In 1962 alone, she played 2 different characters on My Three Sons. Casting directors loved her because she could step into any role, nail it, and make the audience laugh or feel something in just one scene. At the center of it all was her relationship with George Cukor. He changed her life. He wasn't just a director. He was one of the few openly gay men in 1950s Hollywood, and he had an eye for talent that didn't fit the mold. He didn't just give Nancy her first film role, he believed in her when nobody else did. Even after one of her scenes got cut from A Star Is Born without his approval, he kept supporting her. Cukor had worked with the biggest names in the business, but he made time for Nancy Kulp because he saw her potential. And that says everything. Then came the love-starved spinster. They wanted someone who looked smart, sounded sharp, and wouldn't blend in with a bunch of country folk. That's why CBS cast Nancy Kulp as Miss Jane Hathaway. The idea was simple, but brilliant. Put a polished, proper woman next to a family of clueless millionaires from the Ozarks. It worked. Nancy's sharp jawline, serious tone, and stiff posture clashed perfectly with the wild backwoods energy of the Clampetts. But her role wasn't just some uptight secretary. The writers gave her a twist. She was secretly in love with the handsome but dim-witted Jethro. And to make it even funnier, they played with her real name. Nancy Jane Kulp became Jane Nancy Hathaway. It was a quiet inside joke, but it added depth to a character that would go down as one of the most iconic sidekicks in television history. By 1967, her hard work finally got serious recognition. Nancy was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy. It was during the 5th season of the Beverly Hillbillies, when the show was pulling in a 23.4 rating, and still one of the 10 most-watched shows in the U.S. She was up against big names, Marion Lorne from Bewitched, who actually won posthumously, and Frances Bavier from The Andy Griffith Show. But Nancy's nomination meant something more. It showed how much life she brought to a role that could have been flat. The awkward bird-watching, the desperate longing, the tight bun in her hair, it all worked. And it wasn't even the first time she played a bird-obsessed woman. Years before, she had a similar part in The Bob Cummings Show as Pamela Livingstone. That earlier role became the blueprint for Miss Jane, and by the late 1960s, Nancy was already being called the Bird Lady on set and by fans. For 9 full years, Nancy Kulp played Miss Jane in every single episode, 274 in total. From 1962 to 1971, the show dominated American TV. In its first 2 seasons, it ranked number 1 in the Nielsen ratings with scores of 36.0 and 39.1. That's unheard of even today. 16 of its episodes are still in the top 100 most-watched shows of all time. It didn't just entertain, it shaped an entire genre. And Nancy's role was key. Her character never changed outfits much, never chased the spotlight, but somehow she stayed burned into people's memories. Even 45 years later, when people thought of the Beverly Hillbillies, they pictured her, buttoned up, carrying a clipboard, and giving Jethro one more disapproving look. The show's cancellation came as part of CBS's infamous Rural Purge, where they axed anything that felt too country. But by then, Miss Jane Hathaway was already a pop culture fixture. Nancy Kulp's life took a sharp turn in 1961 when she divorced Charles Malcolm Dacus. They had been married for 10 years, since April 1, 1951. After the split, something strange happened. She was never seen dating a man again. Not once. In a time when Hollywood expected actresses to be constantly linked with handsome men to keep up appearances, Nancy completely vanished from the dating spotlight. Gossip magazines took notice. So did industry insiders. For a working actress with a steady career, the total silence around her love life was almost unheard of. Instead of romantic outings, Nancy filled her days with women friends, colleagues, and charity work. People started whispering. Rumors spread fast in Hollywood, especially in the 60s and 70s, and soon enough, many believed they knew the reason she kept her private life so guarded. Nancy didn't just avoid men romantically, she avoided being seen with them, even for harmless publicity photos. That wasn't just unusual, it was deliberate. Then, in 1989, when she was 68 and just 2 years from death, Nancy finally gave the world a clue. She sat down with Bose Hadley, a journalist known for chronicling LGBTQ+ figures in Hollywood. What she said wasn't loud or bold, but it was clear. She carefully framed her answer in metaphor. "Do you think opposites attract?" she asked herself. My own reply would be that I'm the other sort. I find that birds of a feather flock together. That was her truth, quietly laid out for anyone listening closely. She knew exactly what she was doing. Nancy once called any talk about sexuality in show business the fatal question. And she was right. In her era, saying the wrong thing could kill a career. But Nancy found her own way. That bird metaphor wasn't new for her. She used it often, slipping it into interviews throughout the 70s and 80s. Her Beverly Hillbillies character was part of a bird-watching club, just one more layer of quiet symbolism for those who understood. Journalists caught on. She never said too much, but never too little either. Then came the moment that caught everyone off guard, a game show appearance in the 70s. Nancy Kulp looked into the camera and said she would not date a man. This was long before most public figures dared to be open. Hollywood didn't like surprises like that, and certainly not from someone America saw in their living rooms every week. Executives panicked. Some said she might lose future roles. But it didn't matter. Nancy had said her truth out loud, and the guessing game was over. By 1984, Nancy wasn't just a former TV star. She wanted to become a congresswoman. At 62, she ran for the U.S. House of Representatives in Pennsylvania's 9th District. She moved back to her home state, settled in a small country house near Mifflintown, and campaigned as a Democrat in a deeply Republican area. Her platform was progressive: higher taxes for the rich, less military spending, and stronger environmental laws. She'd never held office before, but that didn't stop her. She told voters, "I'm new to politics, but not to life." And people listened. Hollywood friends rallied behind her. Ed Asner hosted a fundraiser at his house in Los Angeles. Big names showed up: Betty White, Valerie Harper. That night alone raised $28,000. It looked like Nancy might pull off a surprise win. But just when momentum was building, the rug was pulled out from under her. Her former co-star, Buddy Ebsen, stepped in, and not to help. he recorded a radio ad for her opponent, Bud Schuster. Using his famous Jed Clampett voice, Ebsen told voters that Nancy was too liberal and didn't understand hard-working Pennsylvanians. The ad played 147 times in 2 weeks. It hit hard. What made it worse? Ebsen wasn't even from Pennsylvania. Nancy was. She grew up there. He lived in California. But his voice carried weight with voters who had watched the Beverly Hillbillies for years. To make it even more personal, Ebsen sent $100 to her opponent's campaign. Nancy heard the ad for the first time while sitting in a diner in Altoona. Her hands shook. This wasn't just politics, it was betrayal. She had always thought Ebsen was difficult, even on set. Their political views had clashed. But she never expected this. Years later, she still refused to let anyone mention his name around her. In interviews, if she had to talk about the show, she kept it professional. But in private, she made it clear he was dead to her. The election results were brutal. On November 6, 1984, she lost, badly. She got 59,449 votes. Schuster got 117 to 203. That's just 33.6% to his 66.4%. It wasn't close. Reagan had just won re-election in a landslide, pulling Republicans up all across the country. But that wasn't the only reason Nancy lost. The ad from Ebsen hurt. Voters didn't take her seriously. Some thought a Hollywood actress couldn't possibly understand politics. Ironically, Ronald Reagan had made that same jump and won the presidency. But for Nancy, the door slammed shut. She never ran again. The campaign was over. Her political hopes were done. And so was any remaining connection with Buddy Ebsen. Her anger never faded. Friends said her mood would instantly darken if his name came up. She once said, "He's not the kindly old Jed Clampett that you saw on the show." She meant it. Their feud became legendary in Hollywood, with people quietly taking sides. Meanwhile, Redd Foxx was born John Elroy Sanford in St. Louis on December 9, 1922. His father abandoned him at age 3. His mother was half Seminole. He grew up in poverty on Chicago's South Side. As a kid, he was called Smiley because he never stopped smiling. At 13, he started playing washboard in a band. By 16, he was hopping freight trains to New York with no money and no plan, just big dreams and raw nerve. In Baltimore nightclubs, he became Redd Foxx, a mix of his nickname Red for his hair and complexion, with a stylish twist on Fox, inspired by baseball star Jimmy Fox. That name stuck, and the moment he hit the stage, everything changed. In 1955, he got just $25 to record Laugh of the Party. But that one filthy comedy record sold over 15 million copies. By 1961, he had more than 35 albums out, with titles so explicit they couldn't be shown in white stores. Over time, he released more than 50 of them, selling 10 million copies in total. He was the undisputed king of raunchy records. These records didn't get played on the radio. They were sold under the counter, especially in black neighborhoods, and became a secret hit. He even got signed to a label tied to Frank Sinatra. Before TV ever noticed him, he was already a legend. He toured the Chitlin circuit with his partner, Slappy White. They earned $450 a week in 1947. Serious money back then. They didn't wear blackface like most acts. They didn't hold back. They spoke raw truth, with jokes nobody else dared tell. Segregation kept them out of white clubs. That rejection gave Fox freedom. His comedy got sharper, dirtier, and more fearless. In the 1940s, Fox worked in Harlem as a dishwasher. His co-worker? A young Malcolm X. They called each other Chicago Red and Detroit Red because of their hair. They were tight. They hustled together, slept on rooftops, and sold stolen zoot suits. They even joined the Communist Party, but only for the sandwiches and white women, according to Fox. Their friendship only ended when Malcolm's life took a darker turn. Fox's rebellion wasn't just on stage. When World War II came, he ate half a bar of soap to fake heart problems and dodge the draft. It worked. He failed the physical and stayed out of the war. That same year, 1946, he also recorded 5 songs. He was serious about staying in entertainment, no matter what it took. His big break came in 1970 when Norman Lear asked him to star in the U.S. version of a British show called Steptoe and Son. Lear had just hit it big with All in the Family and wanted to recreate that magic. Fox's version became Sanford and Son, named after his late brother. It premiered in January 1972 and blew up instantly. It was set in Watts, Los Angeles, and captured working-class black life with humor and heart. By 1973, Fox had won a Golden Globe and was nominated for 3 Emmys in a row. Sanford and Son stayed in the Nielsen Top 10 for most of its 6 seasons. His character, grumpy junk dealer Fred Sanford, became iconic. Every time he faked a heart attack and yelled, "I'm coming to join you, Elizabeth," America laughed. What fans didn't know was that he based those scenes on his real-life draft-dodging stunt. But success came with a price. Fox's personal life was a mess. His first marriage ended early. His second wife, Betty Jean Harris, managed his businesses until she allegedly stole $110,000. He got a restraining order and demanded the money back. His third wife accused him of domestic violence. His fourth marriage lasted just 3 months. Behind the scenes, his cocaine use spiraled. He wore a gold Coke spoon around his neck. He snorted on set. Despite making millions, the money vanished. By 1989, the IRS stormed his Vegas mansion. They took everything: 7 cars, his ukulele, Elvis's watch, $12,000 in cash, even the jewelry off his neck. He owed $755,000 in back taxes, but with interest and penalties, the total shot past $2.5 million. The whole thing was caught on TV. Redd Foxx, a comedy giant standing outside in his underwear, watching his life get seized. Even while the world laughed with him, he was fighting backstage. Fox clashed with NBC, furious that the show had almost no black writers or producers. He said it had enough white producers to cast a Tarzan film. He demanded ownership. When they refused, he walked off. NBC sued him for $10 million. He left Sanford and Son in 1977 for a new variety show, fed up with being underpaid and overlooked. They couldn't have been more different, at least on paper. One was a loud, raw comedian from the Vegas Strip, known for his filthy party records. The other, a quiet, book-smart actress who played a straight-laced secretary on one of America's most family-friendly sitcoms. But somehow, Redd Foxx and Nancy Kulp found each other. And what they had, hidden behind Hollywood's bright lights, was real. Their story began in the late 1960s at a charity event in Los Angeles. Nancy was famous for the Beverly Hillbillies, playing the prim and proper Miss Hathaway since 1962. Redd, on the other hand, had already dropped more than 50 comedy albums and was one of the first black comedians to perform for white audiences in Las Vegas. They met just before Redd would blow up on Sanford and Son in the 1970s. And even though people around them were shocked by the pairing, they connected instantly. Not romantically, at first, but intellectually. Both cared deeply about civil rights. Both believed in using fame for something bigger than themselves. And both were tired of the fake Hollywood scene. Nancy came with degrees in English, French, and journalism. She had served in the Navy. Redd came from the streets of St. Louis, educated by hardship and honed by years on the Chitlin circuit. But they both loved books, politics, conversations that made other people uncomfortable. Together, they could talk for hours, About race, justice, comedy, language. People who saw them said it was magnetic. No flirting, no pretenses, just raw connection. As the years passed, they kept running into each other at private parties, network events, and studio lots. In public, they barely interacted. But behind closed doors, their chemistry was unmistakable. Stagehands and insiders remembered them staying up late, debating ideas and laughing over drinks. Nancy was sharper, bolder, funnier than her TV character. And Redd, despite his dirty jokes, was deep, thoughtful, and incredibly private. They were opposites, but not really. They knew their bond had to remain secret, and not just because of Hollywood politics. This was the 60s and 70s. In 1970, only 0.7% of American marriages were interracial. By 1980, it was still just 1.3%. Studios feared losing Southern audiences, so interracial romances were career suicide. Even Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was considered a major risk. Behind the scenes, producers warned their stars, don't get involved, don't get caught. And for Nancy, there was even more to lose. She never officially came out, but many believed she was gay or bisexual. In that era, being part of the LGBTQ+ community could destroy your career overnight. Studios hired private investigators. Contracts had morality clauses. Being seen with the wrong person, man or woman, could get you blacklisted. So for Nancy and Redd, being together in any public way meant risking everything. Redd had his own baggage. He wasn't just edgy. He was known for scandal. His comedy albums were filthy, raw, and unapologetic. He went through messy divorces, lost millions, and once earned $4 million in a year, only to go broke. He was brilliant, but difficult. He walked off Sanford and Son in 1977 over a contract dispute and left his co-star in the dark. Networks were already hesitant. One more controversy could finish him. And Nancy? She'd be dragged into it too. So they kept quiet. But in 1989, something changed. Nancy gave an interview where she hinted at a missed chance with a fearless colleague. She never named names. But when she said, "Birds of a feather flock together," it contradicted everything people thought about her and Redd. She praised people who broke social norms through their work. It was subtle, but for anyone paying attention, it was a whisper from a woman who had spent her life keeping secrets. A year later, in 1990, Nancy was diagnosed with cancer. She had smoked for decades, long before the dangers were known. The illness moved fast. Chemotherapy drained her, body and spirit. By February 3, 1991, she was gone. She was 69. She died quietly in Palm Desert, California. Her body was returned to Pennsylvania. There was no big Hollywood funeral, no public reveal of her truths. Just 8 months later, Redd died too. On October 11, 1991, during rehearsals for the royal family, he collapsed on set. At first, everyone thought it was a joke. Just Redd doing his old heart attack bit from Sanford and Son. But this time, it was real. He whispered, "Get my wife," twice. He never recovered. He was 68. His burial was paid for by Eddie Murphy, who called him the funniest man he ever knew. After their deaths, the silence finally broke. Friends started talking. People who had seen them together at those parties, in those corners of Hollywood, shared what they knew. They spoke about the deep conversations, the laughter, the connection. They weren't just friends. They weren't just flirting. It was more than that. It was something real. Something Hollywood never allowed them to show. In a town obsessed with image, they had found something rare, something that didn't fit the mold. Not black or white, not straight or gay, not star or sidekick. Just two souls who saw each other when nobody else did. And while they died with their secret intact, their story didn't stay buried. Because love like that always finds a way to be remembered.